What is up, guys? PK here, and in today's video I want to talk about all things mutators and the new patch. Now, I am working very hard on doing a proper dungeon guide for Lazarus, a proper mutated dungeon guide for Lazarus. I think I'm probably at a point now where I could make an accurate dungeon guide, but I like certainty when it comes to guides. I don't like pretending like I know what I'm talking about. And so I very often try and make the distinction between what I know and what I think, right? What I'm estimating. And so I don't feel like it's fair for me to make this guide until I have beaten the tier 10 in the actual live version. But here's the problem. I can't beat tier 10. Not because I can't reach tier 10, not because we wouldn't be able to do it with our group, not for any of those good reasons. The reason I can't beat tier 10 is because I physically can't obtain the keys I need to get there. And that is a problem. So I actually made a mistake. I said in a previous video, because that was how I thought it worked at the time, that a single mutated dungeon key could get you all the way to tier 10, right? I thought you would use a key, do tier 1, and then you'd progress through the tiers, and then once you manage to not get a score of silver, then you would lose, so to speak, get your reward, and at that point you would then have consumed the key. But of course, as you probably know by now, that is not how it works. You need a dungeon mutator key for every single tier. And this poses a serious problem, in my opinion. Now, if you see here, if you go to craft one of these keys, they have a weekly cooldown, right? The one in the faction shop has a weekly cooldown. You get one key for free. That's 3 keys. Now, here's my problem. First of all, time gating, artificial time gating, is lazy design. Period, end of story. I had a really good discussion with my friend Igo, and shout out to her, regarding the whole system, right? And so my problem is that I feel like we're being artificially prevented from progressing, right? There's no good reason right now why I shouldn't be able to craft a key and go progress to the next stage, right? Because the issue that exists right now, and this is the reason why, if you guys have your keys right now, for the love of God, don't use them. Don't use your own keys yet, okay? Wait a few days. Wait till the end of the week, okay? For as many tiers as possible, in terms of your progression, your unlocking of the next tier, you want to be on a bot spot, okay? If at all possible, or a friend spot, or whatever. But then you're technically just screwing your friend over, right? You and all your friends, if you have a pre-made team, don't consume any of your keys. Why? Because otherwise you're going to run into the exact same wall that we have run into now. What is this wall? Well, this wall stems from the problem that if I were to go and try and buy a key right now, well, it would be physically impossible, nearly, for me to find someone that could actually queue the tier that I need, right? Because 99.9% of the people that have keys right now have only done up to maybe tier 3. Which means finding someone who not only has a key, but also has already progressed to a high enough tier, but also is willing to either sell spots to his non-friends or even sell the whole key, right? You can't find them right now. They simply don't exist. And if they do, we're talking about a ridiculous sum of money. I've seen people post in global chat offering like 50k gold for a dungeon key. And I think that price is likely to increase, if anything. So what's my problem, right? Because Igo, she made a fair point. She told me that, well, PK, the problem is that you want to min-max, you want to complete all the content in the first week, and that you're not supposed to do that. The devs don't want you to finish all the way to tier 10 in the first week, right? This is a long-term thing, and so really the problem is that you're trying to progress too fast. Okay, that's a fair point. However, my issue is not so much in the fact that I can't get to tier 10 this week. That's all right. If I can't do that this week, then fine. But it should not be on the basis of them simply locking me out of trying, right? Like, if I can't get to tier 10 this week, it should be because, okay, I actually can't get high enough gear score to do it. Or it should be because it's so hard that I actually can't yet master the strategies to get to tier 10 yet, right? Because the problem is, if you and your friends have used your mutator keys, which we have, right? So we, you do tier 1, you do tier 2, then tier 3 is suddenly hard, right? Then you upgrade your gear a bit, you get some umbral shards from doing your gypsum, then you queue tier 3, you manage to beat it, tier 4, you manage to beat it, tier 5, oh boom, right? Maybe you hit another wall, at least at tier 6, and boom, you hit another wall, right? And you sort of do this slow progression, right? But then once you've used your keys, then you're like, you can't physically find anyone who wants to sell you a spot. You can't find anyone who wants to use their key with you. You can't. What are you going to do? There's no way to actually do it, which is why you want to be on all the low tier ends, right? Because I could go and find a spot in a tier 1 to 3 like this, right? No time, easy, no problem, because that's where everyone is at. But now, because of an artificial time gate, we are prevented from progressing any further. And potentially, if at all possible, it might cost you 50,000 gold to run a dungeon. And that's if you're lucky enough to even find anyone willing to sell it to you, which is nearly impossible. I see so many people posting in chat all over the place about purchasing these high tier keys, but there's none around because everyone was like, oh yeah, we're going to use my keys. That makes a lot of sense. But now we're just prevented not from progressing, but from even trying in the first place. It's such a stupid and lazy system. And I'm kind of mad, right? And think about it this way. You get to tier 10, right? And it's my understanding, this could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my current understanding that once the week runs out, the dungeon changes, right? So it's going to be another dungeon with new mutators, and you have to start again from tier 1. Now, technically, if you have a 5-man group, right, you get 2 keys each, 5 from the faction shop, 5 from beating the initial dungeon, and then you can craft an extra 5. That gives you 15 keys. So technically, if you had high enough gear score, then yes, next week, you might actually be able to progress all the way to tier 10 just on those 15 keys. But my problem is this artificial, unnecessary time gating. You see, part of the problem and part of what makes these mutators difficult has nothing to do with actual skill. It is, sure, there's a level of skill required within your group to learn how, okay, where do we aggro to, right? Where do we pull, how much do we pull, and how do we drag the minions together, clear them effectively, move on, right? That's one aspect. Then there's the second aspect, which is learning the mutators, right? So learning, okay, how do I avoid the problem of this mutation? How do I avoid the problem of this mutation? How do I avoid the problem of this mutation? But even once you master all of those, none of that matters even the slightest if your gear score isn't on par. Let me explain why. For those of you that don't know, you could read in the patch notes, I'm not going to show them to you right now, but essentially, the reason you run into this wall, right? The reason you run tier 2 and you're like, oh, that was easy. Then you run tier 3 and you're like, the fuck, right? It's not just the mutators. It is the artificial calculation that the game does on an individual level. Let me give you an example. A minion hits. Let's just say it has an attack that deals 10,000 damage, right? It punches both you and your friend. But your friend has an average gear score, and it's the average, right? Not the expertise, it's the gear score you see down here. So your friend has this gear score, let's just say his gear score is 610, right? But your gear score is 605. Well, if the mutator suggests that your gear score should be somewhere in between, right? 608, whatever. These are not actual numbers, this is just a hypothetical example, right? But then what the game would do is that 10,000 damage would have an individual calculation based not on your armor, not on your gear, not on what actually constitutes your character, but dependent on your actual gear score, it will artificially inflate the amount of damage you take or downgrade the amount of damage you will take if your gear score is higher than the average, right? Which means the same exact attack, completely separate from the armor, right? Because my friend might have a bit more armor than me, right? So he might have a bit more damage reduction. Let's just say he has a 2% more damage reduction if he has that 5 higher gear score. But on top of that 2% reduction, which wouldn't make a big difference, the game actually artificially inflates that so that I might take 2 times as much damage as he does, maybe 3 times as much damage, right? It's insane. And that has another unforeseen consequence, right? Let's say that my hammer breaks. See what happens? If I take off my hammer right now, my gear score dropped to 473. I had this happen in a tier 5 mutator last night. I punched an elite minion, right? The archer, the elite archer, where you have 2 named elite minions right before you open the gate and do the run. That archer, right? I did a heavy attack on the archer. As such, boom, my hammer broke. In the next split second, right? I was full HP, and in the next split second, I insta-died completely, like no rest possible. We were talking complete death and respawn. Why? Well, because the breaking of my hammer actually, as I understand it, this is my understanding, that actually means when my hammer is broken, it has no gear score, dropping my average gear score below 500, thus making the arcane damage that was present and before dealt maybe like 10% of my health. It instantly killed me, annihilated me, causing me to have to respawn because my hammer broke after I took an attack. That means if any single piece of your gear breaks, right? If any one of your gear pieces break, you just instantly get executed by any amount of damage. Because of this artificial scaling. It is such a lazy system. Okay, it is so lazy. Like, the difficulty should be based off of the mutators. It should be based off of the actual proportions of your gear. Right? The scaling in PvP should not be any different, in my opinion, from the scaling inside a dungeon when fighting a mutator, besides the level of the enemy. The level of the enemy, that's one way you could do some scaling in a clever way that actually would make sense. But the fact that it's based on your gear score also has another adverse effect. Essentially, it artificially gatekeeps people that don't have a full legendary set, right? Because even if you have an unnamed piece of gear, right? If I like, my old amulet was 599 health divine, purple amulet, right? Sure, I could upgrade it. Why would I? I would feel obliged to, in a sense, but without really having any gains from it outside of the increase to the gear score that I need to get my umbral shards to upgrade the rest of my gear. Again, it's an artificial system, right? It's so stupid. That means people that have a few good purples, have to spend the same amount of extra umbral shards to get them up to 600, from where it just becomes super cheap to upgrade them, at least for the first 10-15 gear score, right? In particular the first 10, that's when it starts to take off exponentially. But that is so stupid. That means the people that are trying to grind their umbral shards almost feel obliged to not progress until they have a legendary to replace their purple with, because either they have to waste all their shards to upgrade a purple that they're then going to replace anyways at another point with a legendary, or they have to try and grind the legendary now, right, in order to get their average gear score high enough, because it's not the actual piece of gear that matters, it's the gear score of the actual item, and it's much cheaper to start upgrading a legendary, kind of even forcing some people to buy bad legendaries to upgrade just because that's cheaper, just so they can get high enough gear score so they can actually do the dungeon mutators they need to get the umbral shard. It's such a stupid system, and it's all gate kept. Like, people that actually took the time to get 200 stone cutting, right, are like, the fuck, right? What's the point? I used to love there's so many good aspects in this game. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's all bad. I thoroughly enjoy playing the mutators because they felt, in the beginning at least, difficult enough that I was like, okay, we have to work together, right, to defeat this. And I was like, wow, this is actually really difficult. And I was like, yeah, hell yeah, right? But then I realized it was much more about the fact that my gear score was below the recommended average. That's 90% of the difficulty. At most, it should be 50. Okay, that's 90% of the. If you're like struggling with tier 3, I guarantee you, right? Every time this number goes up by even 1, right? It will get so much easier, like noticeably much easier. Of course, there are other things you can do, which I would also want to mention in my guide. Like, for example, what often kills you in these mutators is the void damage. So you can put in void gems, amethyst, into your gear. You can put lightning gems into your warhammers. You can craft items like I have here with Ancient Bane. You heavy attack a lot, transient strikes. So there's plenty of things you can do to sort of optimize your chances, but none of that matters at all if your gear score is too low. Right? Then it's essentially irrelevant. And that's lazy design. That's what that is. Lazy design. Nothing more, nothing less. Okay? It should be such, in my opinion. Like if a system is well designed, then it doesn't need to have these artificial increases and decreases. If it's a well designed system, right? My gear should always be equal to my gear, right? It's my gear. It has an armor value. That should be my armor value. That should decrease the amount it says, no more, no less, and that should not be dependent on the average gear score. What the fuck has my hammer, right? Me having a hammer on or not? What the fuck should that have to do with how much damage I take? Like, how? Explain me the logic behind me not having a hammer on, now taking 10 times as much damage. It is so lazy, and it's a way to gatekeep the people that really want to put effort into progressing, because they know if they don't, then they're scared that the people will otherwise progress too fast, right? And then when they progress too fast, then they'll get bored when they get to the end, and then they'll stop playing. And I understand that. But you're doing it the completely wrong way. You're frustrating the hell out of us, right? Because if instead the difficulty scaled based off of the actual mutators increasing in difficulty so significantly, but you gave us unlimited tries, right? That would mean that, okay, now I wouldn't have to count on other people. I wouldn't have to pay 50k to give it another shot. I would have to craft a key every single time. I could do as many as I wanted, as long as you still have to grind the materials for the key, right? I wouldn't even mind if the key was more expensive to craft, because you can already buy the first cheap one once a week in the faction shop. That's fine. You get one for free each time. That's fine. But the crafting aspect also being gated is so freaking dumb. It's so lazy, right? I should be able to craft as many of these keys as I want to, okay? As many as I want to, so that I could keep trying, right? And the difficulty should be such that I had to improve skill-wise, not just gear-wise, but skill-wise, as you increase the tiers of the mutators. That is how it should be. You shouldn't, like, because right now, I'm lost in the game. Like me and my group, we've used all our keys, okay? I can't craft one, okay? I can't go farm the materials to craft one. I mean, I can, but that's not gonna work. I can't find anyone who can sell me one. Most people have pre-made groups, so even the ones that might have them are gonna use them within their own groups, and so they're not available for sale, and so I'm stuck on my tier and can't progress. Now I can just sit here for a few days. The only way around this, the single only way around this, is technically, if I could get just one key, right? Just one key, just one, this week. Like one key from a guy who is at the same tier as me, then technically we could carry someone with 3 keys through a high tier, thus unlocking that guy's ability to sell us high tier keys, right? Because then now he would unlock the high tier, so now he could queue the high tiers for us if we boosted him through the dungeon. But why do I have to fucking bother doing that when I'm 200 fucking stone cutting? I'm sorry, but I'm a little bit frustrated. I think this is... And it's totally fixable. It is totally fixable. Like, I really thoroughly enjoy playing the mutators. But Amazon games, come on. This is not good enough. I'm sorry. It's just not. It's lazy. The artificial gatekeeping is a sign that you don't feel confident your system is properly designed. That's it. It's the fact that you incrementally have to increase your gear score to actually defeat the mutators should be about the actual increase to strength of the item. Yeah, anyways, sorry for being so negative. My apologies, this was a bit of a negative video. I'm sorry, normally I'm very happy, very positive person, but this actually frustrated me quite a bit. So let me know down in the comments if you agree, maybe you disagree, maybe you have any other thoughts. And as always, I love you guys. Stay awesome. Peace out. Also, Dungeon Mutator level 10 guide coming soon.